Welcome to Image Bearers. My name is Atoma Edgy. I'm very excited, very excited to have today's program airing. We have some very special guests that we're going to be discussing the topic of unity. And I think with the last few years, we've really had, I think, a lot of pain in the world. And I think this is just a great story for us to really be able to see what can be done with unity within our churches, but prayerfully this might even inspire other churches with their unity. So today, our episode is about Common Grounds Unity. We have on the program John Teal, if you can maybe just give a wave. We have Megan Rawlings. And we have Kevin, who is a senior minister at North County Church of Christ in California. And as I just kind of go through the names, so John Teal is the founder of Common Grounds. He's with the International Church of Christ. That's one of the streams in the Reformation movement. We have Megan Rawlings, as I mentioned. She is a director of development at Kentucky Christian University, among other things. She is with the Christian Church stream. And then Kevin is again, senior minister at the North County Church of Christ in California, and obviously with the Church of Christ stream. So I am with the Detroit Church of Christ here in Michigan, and I'm with the International Church of Christ. Co-hosts for today are Tina Brunner, who is the executive director of World Convention of Churches, Churches of Christ. She's with the Christian churches, if you can give a wave, Tina. We also have Ben Brewster, who is the senior minister at Airline Drive Church of Christ, and obviously he is with the Church of Christ. So it's going to be, I think, just an incredible episode today. Get to learn about, like I said, Common Grounds, and get some inspiration about how we can be even just more unified in our churches. This is season 3 of Image Bearers, episode 35. Those of you that enjoy this episode, please consider subscribing and clicking that little bell so you can get notified of other great episodes that come up. So without further ado, we're going to hand it over to the great author of Torn Asunder, which is Ben Brewster, who's sporting a similar hairstyle to me today. He does switch it up every 50 years, but for right now, he's going with this hairstyle. Why don't you take it away, Mr. Ben?
Hey, thanks, Otama. I feel a connection with you because of the hairstyle. But hey, John, Kevin, and Megan, good to see you guys again. And would you start off by sharing a little bit about yourselves and how God brought you into His kingdom?
Sure, I can start with that. For me, I didn't grow up going to church. We did a little bit here and there. But my grandparents were very, very faithful disciples and had a huge impact on me. And so every time I go stay with them, they'd haul me off to church, and it really planted a seed in my life. And I remember great times where my grandfather he and I would lay on the floor and he'd read the Bible to me, and it had an impact. But then I became a teenager, and everything went out the window, and kind of went out and sowed my own seeds and did it very heartily, I would say. So, but when I about 20 years of age, I started rethinking my life and where it was going, and started thinking about going back to church. And at that point, we hired a butcher in the grocery store where I was working, and he was from the Church of Christ, and we started talking, and then we sat down, studied the Bible together, and then I was baptized in April 4th of 1980. So it was a long time ago, but it radically changed my life.
I'll go. So I was born and raised in the church, and I have loved Jesus as long as I can remember. And actually, that for a long time, I almost thought I wasn't going to be as effective in ministering to people and sharing the gospel because I didn't have some really cool testimony. And then a friend in college was like, that is a cool testimony. Like, it's just different. You don't have to have some crazy past to be used by God. And that was really encouraging. And then when I got into adulthood, I started a women's ministry that helped women go deeper in Bible study and faith. And that's just my passion. And I love unity. So we're all about women and unity and Jesus. So those are my three things. Oh, and I'm married to a preacher. He was an attorney that turned into a preacher. So no matter where he ends up in eternity, there's a special place for him, guys.
Well, I'll go next. I would say my testimony is a little bit like Megan's in the sense that I grew up in the context of the church, kind of third generation family in the churches of Christ. And my conversion was progressive. You know, I don't have a dramatic conversion experience other than to say I know the day when I was a young person when I decided to commit my life to Christ and put him on in baptism. But my life was always moving in that direction. My family, my parents introduced me to Jesus and to the Lord, and my life was always in the context of the church community and our local body. A lot of great people that influenced me and encouraged me along the way. As a young person, I had some people that were very formative in my life that helped me to really sense a call, you might say, into ministry. And early as a young person, felt like the direction of going into full-time ministry was the direction that God had for me. So my life headed in that direction, went into college and pursued that, and have been at it ever since. So there's more we could say, but that's probably enough.
Now, John, you started an incredible group called Common Grounds Unity. What was it that inspired you to start CGU?
Yeah. Well, let me first of all kind of reframe the question, or maybe the answer. I'm not sure that I started it as I was part of it. I actually came up with this idea that unity starts with a cup of coffee. And I shared it with Scott Ferguson, who is an elder in the Church of Christ here that meets right next door to where we meet. And so I had met him and shared the idea, and we were talking, why are we so divided? And I shared this idea that unity starts with a cup of coffee. And he said, let's do it. I'm like, okay, let's do it. And so honestly, if it hadn't been for Scott, it might have stayed as an idea. And so we basically, our first meeting, we had eight people there, elders and ministers from different streams. And it was really exciting. I think what inspired me was, so I was baptized in the Church of Christ, and the congregation that I went to, I would say they tended to be rather exclusive in their thinking and their attitudes. And then I kind of stayed in those kind of streams for a while, and it rubbed off. And so I bought into the party line, but I did read my way out of legalism, which was a really good thing. People like Carl Ketcherside really had a major impact on me. Leroy Garrett, James North, James DeForest Murch. Later on, your book, Torn Asunder, was a great read. So I think what kind of happened to me at some point, I became like somebody who quit smoking. It's like you can't stand it when you're around it, and so I think as time went on, I just really I became more and more grieved about the sectarian attitudes that are, in some of our circles within the Stone Campbell movement. And unfortunately, I think it tarnishes our movement. And there's a much better way forward, I believe. And so one thing led to another, and I think the Holy Spirit just kind of carried it away. We had that first meeting, and then another meeting started, and another meeting started, and we've just been trying to play catch up ever since. So
that's great, John. Kevin, tell us a little bit about the purpose of this group.
I'll say, I mentioned a little earlier, my conversion was kind of progressive. You have these moments of awakening to truths that you'd missed. And I grew up with some of that very sectarian spirit in our church. When I went off to college, I think I discovered through some good teaching much more about grace and then unity. I'll never forget the Watershed book by Rubel Shelley, I Just Want to Be a Christian, that kind of marked out really what the plea of the movement was, undenominational Christianity. And as I saw the division within the Restoration movement, I had a love for the Restoration plea, but I always thought, how did this plea turn into groups that are so divided and apart from one another? And I started to meet people in the different groups and thought, boy, we have far more in common than not. So from early on, I felt this strong desire to see unity built between the streams of this movement. When John Teal came along and guys like Russ Kirkpatrick here in San Diego and talked about common grounds unity and the prayer of Jesus, there was a mission statement there that was developing that just caught my heart, caught my attention, which is basically out of John 17:25. Jesus is in that upper room, and his prayer, our mission statement, that they may all be one, that the world may believe. How is the world ever going to be attracted to a message that is proclaimed by a people that can't get it together and get along on the core essentials, and that find more reasons to part company than to come together? So that's, the purpose is found in that prayer of Jesus, and our desire to, at least in one way, seek to be an answer to that. Ephesians 4, Paul talks about a basis for unity. There are core essentials. Unity is not kind of just a blending of, hey, whatever you want to believe, and we'll all just go along to get along. There are core truths that we all hold to, but there's an atmosphere of unity as well. And it's be humble, be completely humble. It's all there in Ephesians 4, 1 and 2. We can have gentle dialogue, loving dialogue. We can ask, what do we see alike, before we start with, hey, what do we see different? So the purpose of Common Grounds Unity is basically just to get those conversations started, to try to be an answer to that prayer of Jesus. And it's really more of a grassroots movement rather than, something that's top heavy with, hey, here's how it needs to happen, and here's curriculum, and here's all these. Now we're just trying to provide some resources through podcasts, some good essays and writings, introduce people in the different streams to one another so we can get to know one another, share resources, but more than anything else, get followers of Christ in the Stone Campbell movement. And I would say beyond, even as we kind of move toward answering that prayer of Jesus, to just sit down and have a cup of coffee and start getting to know one another, start building the bridges, start building the relationships. And the most gratifying part of this has been this group that I'm a part of in San Diego. That we get together, and COVID kind of stopped that for a while. We were on Zoom, but just getting people to get to know one another. And boy, once you start loving somebody and really caring about them, seeing their heart for Jesus, man, you can easily talk about things that you hold in common, and then even some of those things that you might see differently.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So Megan, it seems that CGU is building unity and community by gathering leaders from all different streams of the Restoration movement. Can you share about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first started the podcast, I'm going to be honest with you guys. It was funny. John had contacted me to help with like the editing and stuff. And he was like, so you're in the Christian church. And I was like, well, let me tell you, John, I was actually born and raised Baptist. So don't tell anyone. And he was like, oh no, but I married a restoration man, and I absolutely fell in love with the idea of in non-essentials freedom and in essentials unity. And I was like, so I can still, have certain theology and still be a part of this church. And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, I'm all in. And so it's just really taken off from there. And I love the restoration movement. But because I was new, I had no idea that there were all these splits within it. And I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are just like us, the Baptists. Like, you guys have a bunch of you too. And so it was really fun talking to the guys at first, because they were explaining the ICOC, the Churches of Christ, the Christian church. And I used to tease Kevin all the time that we were going to introduce him into exposure therapy to the instruments to see what would happen. So it was a really great time. And so it was fun because talking to these guys, I was like, well, I don't even see where the disunification is. I don't even see where the problems lie, because in non-essentials, there's freedom. And as long as we believe in the Trinity and that Jesus died for our sins, there's unity there. And it's okay that Kevin hates music, And I'm just teasing. Kids' eyes were great big. It was a joke.
We've had a lot of conversations like this. It's a party, this group, by the way.
Yeah. And it's okay that John, followed the group and did their thing. But we still were able to be friends and communicate. And I even brought my cup of coffee because, unity starts with a conversation, and conversations are a lot easier over coffee because people are nicer with coffee. And so it's been great to have folks from these different streams come on and just talk about what they're doing and be able to encourage them, even though they're from the Church of Christ. I don't care. You still love Jesus and you're still spreading the message. And we can do this together because, as Kevin said, that was Jesus' whole message. Let's do the unification so that people want to be part of what the kingdom looks like. So,
right. Amen.
It's really a shame that yeah. Well, it's really a shame that Megan's not more positive.
Yes.
Like that really, John, you could have found somebody that had a little more energy.
Yeah. We really got to get her pumped up to get some energy out of her.
And it's pretty early in the morning. Yeah. Yeah. Guys, this can be for anybody, but when you all started this, did you have preconceived ideas about what it would be like? And how have you seen Unity grow?
Yeah, well, for me, I was really nervous when we started this thing, and especially the first time we met. I thought there was going to be a lot of tension. Excuse me. I also kind of had some. I'll just be honest with you. I was baptized in the Churches of Christ, the a cappella church, and then later on I became a part of the ICOC, and I was nervous because there's a lot of history there between those two groups, and I thought there could be some just reservations and maybe some attitudes and things like that. And it was just the opposite, honestly. It was so good. It was like coming together as family that's been separated for quite some time, and that's in San Diego, the same thing. I remember first time I met Kevin, we were in line getting our food, and we struck up a friendship, and it's been incredible ever since. And I think the thing that we've seen is that time after time after time, when we cross these barriers, something really beautiful happens and it breaks down. I honestly, probably my biggest reservation was within my own tribe, so to speak. I thought let's face it, like historically speaking, we haven't been, as a Stone Campbell movement, we haven't been very kind to people that have gone through the wall first. And so I'm grateful to people that have gone before, like Leroy Garrett and some other people that have kind of softened things for us. But I thought I would get a lot of blowback from the ICOC leadership. And it was actually just the opposite. I've been so encouraged by so many people within the ICOC that are just so excited. And I have these conversations over and over and over again where people are saying, the time has come. This is such a great thing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm seeing that happen in all the streams as well. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, I think I would add to that, having grown up in a cappella churches, I know our history of sectarianism, that within our family of churches, when somebody refers to the Lord's Church, I know what they're referring to. And I've always had good friends in the ICOC. Back when the movement got started, I had friends that kind of went that way, and knew at that time a number of them started to differentiate between me as a Christian and them as a, quote, disciple. And I'd sometimes hear that we have cousins in the faith, and I've always thought I don't have any cousins in the faith. We've got one Father. That makes us all sons and daughters and brothers and sisters. There are no cousins. And so certainly we kind of work through some things if we get to know one another better. But I knew, people that I grew up with could sometimes be prickly towards others and see some of the differences as more than differences, departures from true Christianity. But I think at the same time, we've seen in our culture so much movement away from a decline of Christianity that I think we're in a time where more and more of our people who are really more about following Christ than just distinctives and honoring our traditions are wanting to find reasons to come together with other believers, maybe more than in any other time in our history. So I think culturally there are some things happening that make this movement better prepared to gain traction. And I think in the churches of Christ, a lot has changed in the last 20 years. We've been through everything from a grace awakening, I think I would call it, in the 80s and early 90s, and worship battles that have made us kind of relook at our old patternistic ways of thinking, that there's only one way to approach certain things. And so a lot's changed in many churches of Christ, not all, but that there's more openness to conversation and dialogue. So even though I went in knowing, I've received those letters of criticism before from brothers and sisters who, in Christian love, level you, but I was very hopeful because I thought I think the time is right. A lot's happened, a lot has changed, and not everybody will come along. But let's see who we can bring along into these discussions and dialogue. So,
yeah,
I wasn't worried. But I also had no idea what to expect, so I was like, "Let's just do it."
She's bold.
Absolutely. Kevin, you mentioned
Megan writes a column called Bold, and she leads the Bold movement, so we like to tease her about that.
Well, it definitely fits. Kevin, you mentioned that one of the things that you enjoy the most is the gathering in San Diego. Will you talk a little bit more about what is a gathering and what makes it, why is it important?
So, a gathering is just the coming together of some like-minded Christians in an area who say, hey, we're going to work towards unity. We're going to start by getting to know one another. So a gathering is real simple. I think sometimes we overcomplicate things and make them harder than they need to be. We've got a fellow here in San Diego named Russ Kirkpatrick, and he is with the San Diego Church of Christ, an ICOC church, and just a wonderful personality, just very warm and easy to love and get to know. And he started, just kind of throwing some invitations out there. And reached out to me, and I reached out to a number of guys and gals within the Churches of Christ stream. He was reaching out to some in the ICOC stream. Evan Foote, who is kind of a pastor emeritus, I might say, at Pomerado Christian Church in the Poway area. We've known each other for years. He's a great brother in Christ, led that church until he kind of retired out of the role as the preacher there and passed it to another. He got involved and started, doing some outreach into some of the Christian church congregations. And so prior to COVID, we'd have a gathering at an outdoor restaurant every couple of months with, 12 to 15 people. Wade and Deb Cook at the San Diego Church of Christ. He's the local evangelist there. They would come and be a part of that. And Russ's dad and, some Church of Christ preachers and a couple of Christian church folks. So the gathering is just, we get together and one of us leads a Devo. We eat together. We talk about what's happening in our churches. We pray together. And I have come to love these brothers and sisters and my family. It hasn't enlarged in the sense that they were always family, but my exposure to and my relationships have enlarged as a result. So we see a lot of good coming from that, doing things together more and sharing together in the work of the kingdom in San Diego. That's the kind of grassroots thing that Common Grounds Unity is all about.
That's great.
Yeah, I can throw in also, I think just keeping it simple is really important, like Kevin said. Sometimes we can overcomplicate things. And the beauty of this whole thing has been the fellowship and the discussion and the dialogue that we have. So that's been really exciting about it. So we like to leave lots of room for conversation and just hanging out and being friends, because really without the love and the friendship, it's just hard to have unity. But if we get that piece in place, because God knows, we've tried to unite on doctrine and that hasn't really worked out all that well. And we've tried to unite on methodology and, that Leroy Garrett says that the Church of Christ doesn't divide over doctrine; it divides over methodology. And I think he was right. We try to prescribe these methods, and so if we can build this on relationship and love for one another, mutual respect, I think that's really where the magic begins to happen.
And let me just add to that, if I can. We can't overstress, I think, the simplicity. And Russ is a guy who is willing to help a gathering get started anywhere. We've kind of help get a gathering started in the Dallas area, and that seems to just be really coming together well. And in some other places. So if anybody wants to reach out to somebody who can help get a gathering started. Sometimes people say, boy, I want to be a part of one, but what does it take? And they think there's going to be all this organization and administrative work. No, get 2 or 3 other believers and Stone Campbell churches together and have a cup of coffee and get it started. Have lunch.
In fact, this week we just started, Lars Coburn started a group, and they had a hybrid session in Eugene, Oregon. And so it was really, really successful. And so So anyways, you can go to our website and we can give that later. But there's all kinds of information to get connected to Russ or to me or whoever.
Yeah, that's great. There are people that are watching in the Louisville, Kentucky area. I would be happy to be part of a Common Grounds Unity group there, or a regional one now that we can. Yes. Well, and then you can do hybrid things. You can do some in person and some on Zoom now that we all know how to do it. The thing that the way I got introduced into Common Grounds was the Facebook group, which is a really low threshold of tiptoeing in to kind of see what it's like to see different perspectives. So there's more than the podcast. There's the Facebook group, there's the gatherings. What are some success stories that you all see through these different mediums of ways that you're communicating with people with Common Grounds Unity?
Yeah. Well, maybe Megan can talk about the podcast. That's one of them that I think has been really successful. If you want to chime in there, Megan.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the podcast, we, one of the super great success stories that I think we've had with like Nadine Templar, she came on. She's a missionary. Okay, cool. So I don't even need to, cool. So she's famous and we're basically best friends. So there's that. No, we're kidding. She came on and it was so encouraging to hear her story and just see what she was doing. And then we had like Rhonda come on, and her husband are in Nashville.
Nashville.
Lipscomb.
At Lipscomb. Okay. And they actually invited me down to have lunch. So that was really exciting. And so it really has created friendships and developed relationships for us, but then it also gives people glimpses into other folks' lives, and it's created conversations, which has started building those relationships, because that's how you do it. I mean, there's no 3-step method into how to unify church bodies. It's really just takes time, conversations, and slowly developing relationships. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. So I think you mentioned the Facebook page. So I'm just going to be honest with you. Like up until Common Grounds, I really hardly ever went on Facebook. I didn't really, I didn't want to spend a lot of time on Facebook. I didn't have a lot of, let's just say I wasn't a big Facebooker. But I realized that it was a way to connect to people, and it's funny how it just it organically developed. We created this group. There's another group called Bereans that's within the ICOC, and I thought, we could do something like that and connect people. And so, like you said, it's a low point of entry. It's an easy point to enter. And what we've noticed is, I think a lot of times people will sit on the periphery and watch for a while. And they're like, what's this all about? And that's a great place to kind of like listen and watch. And then people all of a sudden are, will reach out and say, I want to get more involved, or I want to do that. And so then we started developing teams and getting people involved in teams. And, we do the emails. And so that's another way that people can read the essays, and, different people write for us. Ben has written several articles for us, and so people can engage, but the goal is always to take all these different avenues that we have: the podcast, the Facebook group, the essays, whatever we do. Really, all we want to point it back to the gatherings, whether it's digital or whether it's in person. That's where the magic happens, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think in terms of the word expansion, for me, expansiveness, that the kingdom, its expansiveness is a wonderful thing. And so at the local level, the thought of, sitting across the table with, a great leader in a local Christian church and a good brother in an ICOC church, and me sitting there that's something I wouldn't have seen 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's a little bit of it. We all have different dreams. Well, unifying this movement's always been something in my heart. So it's a little bit of a dream come true to be able to sit and say, we're a part of the kingdom of God together. We're brothers and sisters. So just expanding those relationships is powerful. God can do a lot with that. Then at the level of the podcast, to be working on a podcast with a guy who is in the ICOC and a gal that's in the Christian church, and here I am, a Church of Christ guy, and we're able to bring people into that and have conversations with them across the streams. Man, that's just very exciting. The possibilities of that is exciting. That we can introduce a Ben Brewster who's, written some good stuff about our movement. We can introduce him and his writings to people that may have never known him in the independent Christian churches or the international churches of Christ. That a Doug Foster, who's great, work in our history as a scholar and his scholarship in other areas, that he can become known much more broadly and his works accessed to take a Tina Bruner or, a Randy and Rhonda Lowry, a Jeff Walling. We've got just some terrific people, great people in ICOC ministry. We just spoke to Andy Fleming, and to just have these people become known by their brothers and sisters across the streams, and to let their work be expanded and their influence be expanded, and for us to have access to more resources and people and what people are producing for the kingdom. Man, I think that's going to bless a lot of folks. So I think at the local level, man, we're already seeing things that excite me, and I really think excite the heart of God. And I think to be a part of this at a larger level with the podcast, I think there's good fruit that can really come from giving the opportunities that are being afforded.
If I could share a story, I think in terms of a success story that I think is really exciting is so we actually rented so the church that I'm a part of, the congregation I'm a part of, is an ICOC congregation. We rented the church right next door to the Church of Christ, right? And so we meet there, and but we had previously got to know them through the meeting, and this building just came available. But our minister does not have an office, and he actually lives in a different valley. And so it's interesting. What happened is Daniel Jolliffe and Keith Whitney, who's on our board, they were like, "So where's your office?" And he's like, "Well, I kind of work out of my home, and it's this many miles away." And they're like, "Oh my gosh, really? Like, we have an office." And so they took this beautiful, huge office, right? And they painted it up, and they put furniture in there, and they said, "Here, you can use this." And they don't even charge them for it or anything like that. Just and in doing that, Daniel and Joe have become best friends. They see each other all the time. There's such a incredible connection between the two of them. And I would say the same thing with Keith Whitney and I. We've become best friends. And I think that's the beauty of this. If we just start touching one another and getting a connection with one another, really incredible things begin to happen.
Thank you. I will have to say I am one of the success stories too. I think getting a chance to meet my fellow hairstylist, Ben Brewster, and also to meet Tina, I think has been amazing, just to expand my vision and my understanding of just some of the great people that are out there. So that's been a blessing. I did want to ask, I think with unity also comes a potential for possibility of lowering standards and diluting things. And, at least that can be the temptation, or at least the thought. So my question is for you, Kevin, how do you navigate building unity while addressing issues in our society, such as racism and the role of women? How have you been able to kind of navigate that? Or is that kind of, you work that into building unity? How have you addressed that?
So I would say, a couple of things there. Number one, we're starting, and I would say we're still starting because there are few gatherings, but we're encouraging people to start with, as individuals who have a common love for Jesus and belief that he is Lord, we're not, that scripture is inspired, it is what informs and directs our faith, it's authoritative, that we're all starting from that standpoint. Now, we may differ a little bit on some particulars over here. Let's start with the things that we hold in common. We've stuck there in these starting phases. We've not necessarily used Common Ground to be the place right now where we're going to address all of the hard and controversial questions immediately. Because we then believe ultimately, out of building relationships and getting to know one another more, we can then have some harder conversations and some discussions. But it has to start back here with, hey, let's love one another. And now we come to some of these hard questions, we can hear one another better. And that doesn't necessarily mean in hearing, we're all going to go away saying, well, we agree on every point. But that's our mission more than let's start with the real hard, challenging stuff, the stuff that could cause things to explode immediately if we let it. So I believe we'll get to more of those discussions. You know, one of the subjects you bring up is really a pretty easy one to have, and it shouldn't be a hard one. And we are going to work towards discussion on, for example, racism. That shouldn't be a hard question for people who love Jesus and who are true disciples of Christ to talk about. So we've got some things not too long down the road, a good conversation coming up with some brothers on that subject. But it's not that we'll avoid those. It's just we want to start in the right place with people, again, who love the Lord. They see him as Lord, and they see Scripture as our guide. Let's come back together after years and years of separation, and let's start talking first from where we have things in common, build the bridges that can get us to the place where we can then talk about some tough stuff too. Hope that makes sense.
It does. I think it's a very tough thing to address, both the role of women and racism, while we're just trying to, historically, we've been very doctrine centered. So we're just trying to kind of get through that to then go to the other level of, addressing these matters. I think is a tall order. It does need to be done, but I do think that the approach you stated definitely makes sense. So thank you for that. Did you want to say something, John?
Yeah, I would actually. I would just put a shout out. There's a podcast called the After Class Podcast. There's 3 professors from one of the colleges that I went to on Lansing, Michigan, which is Great Lakes Bible College. So they have a podcast called the After Class, and they spent 14 episodes on women in the Bible, which is a great study. And they started from the Garden of Eden and went forward. And you could tell that they had certain convictions, right? As we should all have certain convictions. We should develop our convictions. I think the beauty of it is at the end, when they were kind of summarizing their observations, the thing that not to do a spoiler alert here, but one of the things that I appreciated so much about the way that they approached it is that in the end, we have to have these discussions on a congregational level, right? And that's what's so important. What we've tried to do is take our individual convictions and blanket everybody else and say, you have to do this. And I think that's where we get into trouble. And so I think that's where these conversations, we're not afraid to talk about these things, but we are careful to talk about it because unity is fragile. And so I think on the local level is where a lot of this work needs to be done, in my opinion.
No, that makes sense. And those the relationships that we can have is definitely on the local level. Those are those who we're closest to. I mean, definitely have Zoom to branch some territory, but that does make sense. Okay. So
it's
another
easy,
thing.
I can just say it's easy for us to blast somebody on their views on Facebook or whatever.
Without knowing them.
Yeah.
What if you don't like coffee?
Well,
we've had some guests on our podcast who tell us, I don't drink coffee.
And we tell them, this is why there was a split.
This is it. I mean, if we can't even get together on coffee, boy.
So just moving on, one of the things that it seems like there are perhaps 2 streams, if you will, that may be up for consideration, which is international Christian churches, kind of like Kip McKean's group, if you will, and then also the Disciples of Christ. So I just wanted to find out, are those, do you know if you have members in CGU who are affiliated with those churches? And, also, can you also share about how you're working to build unity and community with those groups?
Sure. I'll take the first one. I'll let Kevin talk about the Disciples of Christ. And I can talk about the International Christian Church, which is Kip's group. The short answer is that we probably don't have a lot of members. We probably have some members within the Facebook group that are part of that group. And I certainly don't want to make a stereotype here in any way, but my experience, for the most part, with that group, that particular group, has not been positive. Just to be honest with you. Now, that's not with everybody within that group, and I want to be careful about making general statements that include everybody. But I think it's very important for us to play well, and I think how do I say this? When we have, my experience is that particular group tends to have a one true church philosophy. That's a tendency, and it's not with everybody. And so it's hard to have unity when somebody looks at everybody else and says, that they're either lost or they're apostate or they're subpar in their Christianity. It's hard to have a relationship when it's like that. So the conversations, in my experience, have not been particularly positive. I have great hope, and we do not exclude anybody, and we don't want to exclude anybody. But I think we have to learn how to play well together, and I think even within our own tribes, we have to learn how to play well with each other. So I don't know if that answers it or not, but
no, that answers it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think I would say similarly, with the Disciples of Christ, that stream of the Christian church, that we're open to including in gatherings and in our Facebook group and anything we're doing, folks that are in disciples churches. We don't want to stereotype any particular stream of the movement. We can easily do that. And, we're finding there are some like-minded folks that are in DOC churches. I wouldn't say we've made big inroads into folks within Disciples of Christ congregations at this particular point, at least not in our local gathering or the ones I know in Southern California. But there are movements within. We're going to try to have a conversation with some folks that are in a kind of a movement within the Disciples of Christ Church that are wanting to realign more with some biblical principles. And so there's diversity there in that group. There's people that we think are like-minded, but I would say none of us might have the kind of breadth of relationships at this particular point to be able to do too much outreach. And since we're grassroots, we're inviting everybody in the movement who might have a like mind and a desire to answer this prayer of unity and to start building relationships and dialogue. So we exclude no one. We do, there are some things, again, we're not trying to build a unity that is, let's just kind of throw everything out so we can all get together. We'll get to some hard conversations, but we're open to building these relationships with people in all streams, including disciples folks.
Okay, thank you. So a question for you, John, as we continue. I think that we had asked this a little bit earlier, but we didn't want to go too deep. I know we're doing, I think, okay on time. Can you share a little bit about the leadership of the group, Common Grounds Unity? Because it's not just like, ICLC or Church of Christ. It's kind of a blend. So can you maybe share a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I think the leadership starts with the board. So we definitely we believe in diversity to start off with, and we're trying to become more and more diverse as we develop. the board first developed with 4 of us who were white males, just to be honest with you, but we had a common dream together, and then we started reaching out and looking to add more people. So I'm really excited that Alicia Crumpton has come onto the board. She is a great asset and is so helpful in so many ways, and so excited to have her be a part of the team. And so we also want to broaden it. We want to look for racial diversity as well, and we want to look for international diversity as well. And so we're taking little baby steps.
Gotta watch them time zones, man.
Yeah, it's hard.
Midnight.
Yeah, but I think that's where it starts.
Yeah.
And so we definitely want the board to reflect that, and then from there on we start developing teams. I think, the 3 of us here are doing the podcast together. They're the talent. I'm behind the scenes, but it's great that we want to have representation from the different streams, and different genders, different racial makeups of the teams and all that. And I think that's really important as we move forward.
So I think the leadership right now is the 3 streams correct right now, currently, right? So you have International Church of Christ, and Christian churches, primarily.
Primarily, that would be the makeup of the So primarily, okay. Primarily the bulk of people within, are if you want to call them members, but people who follow us are within those streams. Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you. The other question was in reference to the gatherings. Can you share like some of the different areas that you have regular gatherings right now?
Yeah, so we have the Simi Valley group. We have Pasadena group. We had a Orange County group that's kind of, we have to like reform that one. COVID kind of kicked it in the knees a little bit. We have the San Diego group that's doing really, really awesome. We have Dallas. And then we have one that just started in Eugene. And then we have one that's starting in San Francisco. And we have one in Duluth, Minnesota. And there's one that's developing right now. They scheduled their first meeting in Denver. So
nice.
Yes. Oh, and we have one in England as well. That just started. So that's exciting. And so as we do this, one of the things that we've wanted to do is we want to build culture, right? As we do this. So we don't want to push it fast. And so as we do this, we want it to grow organically. And that's kind of what, so we have these emerging chapters that are developing, and we have a map. If you go to our website, you can find it. There's a bunch of emerging chapters. You can connect with people. You can see if there's a chapter that's beginning in your area. And if it's not, you can reach out to Russ or I, and we can help you get started.
And you heard it here today, folks. Tina is also interested in starting one in Kentucky.
Megan, we're not representing. What is going on?
Come on now. All right. Okay. So what are some of the future plans? I know you guys are approaching 2,000 members on the Facebook group. You have a mailing list. You have the podcast. You're diversifying leadership in various ways. You noted. What's the future hold?
Yeah, for me, I think one, I think we want to just follow what the Spirit leads, right? And so I think we want to be listening well to where God is leading. But some of the dreams that I have is with the podcast, I want to start doing some panels, which so when we like this, where we have 3 people or 4 people from the different streams, and do some panels. Maybe we'll do like Next Gen, where we have some young people speaking, who are young leaders, spiritual formation, maybe elders or Christian counselors, conflict resolution, missionaries, all kinds of different stuff. Women in ministry would be a great conversation to have. So
Kevin says you got to wait on that one, though.
Those are some things I think we'd like to do with the podcast. I think other than that, I think all roads point to the gatherings. We really want to, at some point, we want to start meeting in person again. We'll probably start with some hybrid situations. It's really up to the chapters or the gatherings themselves, because they are independent, like we don't manage them. We're just serving them. So we're here. The organization here is to serve the gatherings, not to control them or tell them how to do things. So in more developing more gatherings, and the other thing that I think I'd like to see is this comes down to money, but I think we'd like to have a presence at some of the different, like at Spire or some of the other, I think Lipscomb has a conference, and we have a little bit of a presence at Pepperdine, and in some of these different venues. I think it would be great for us to get people out there and just introduce folks. For me, I think I would love to do some things like we do an Israel trip or something like that. Anyways.
Oh, that's awesome.
We'll see what God does.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to seeing what the future holds. Very, very exciting. All right, so are you guys ready for the getting to know you round?
Sure.
You guys got to bring the energy like Megan. You got to bring it.
Oh man.
I think Kevin's probably going to say he has to leave just because the energy is going to be too much. We'll see. We'll see if he comes up with any excuses. All right. Okay. So this is for either any of you three, John, Megan, and Kevin, to answer. Favorite cuisine?
I'm on. I'm energetic and I'm excited to answer that question.
Come on.
I would say first and foremost, I'm kind of an American steak and potatoes guy. Take me to a good steakhouse and I love it. But second to that, I live in Southern California, so Mexican food is a staple of the diet. So you give me a good carne asada burrito or tell me where I can get one and I'm in. So
Okay.
I had to ask my husband what cuisine meant because I'm a hillbilly. So, and he was like telling me, and I said, "Oh no!" And he said, "What?" And I said, "They're gonna have to learn. I have the palate of a 3-year-old, and gas station food is my favorite. So that's my favorite cuisine. Speedy Cafe.
Okay.
Shout out to Speedy Cafe."
Okay. You gotta watch some hot dogs.
Living in Southern California, I'm not sure I know what gas station food is. Can you expound on that a little bit?
It's food they make at the gas station. It's exactly what it sounds like.
It involves a heat lamp and a hot dog.
One of those hot dogs that's been rolling all day. Okay.
And I don't want to know what rich people food tastes like because I'm living on we're living on a preacher's budget. And so I enjoy my gas station food. That's what we like.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Just don't get sushi at the gas station.
No.
So, yeah.
But hibachi's great. There's hibachi gas stations around here.
Indian food for me.
Okay. Cake or pie?
Pie.
Cake.
Pie.
Okay.
But I'll eat cake. If it's sweet, I'll eat it.
Okay. What's your favorite film or movie?
Casablanca, and I can quote the entire movie word for word.
Okay. We'll do that another day, though.
I don't think I have a favorite, but my favorite this week would be Moneyball. I love that movie. There's so many great lessons in that movie.
Of what not to do. Oh, no, yeah, so a lot of it. Yeah, that's the Michael Lewis, is that?
No, that's Brad Pitt, Moneyball.
I thought, didn't he write it?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. Kevin, favorite movie?
I'm not that sophisticated.
He's not that big of a fan, okay? He's a fan, but he's not that big of a fan.
Megan
I'm
stole
from the
mine. I was going to
Midwest,
say
you know, I'm a
Casablanca.
hillbilly too.
Seen it about 100 times.
Kevin, is
Okay.
that really your favorite?
And yes, we watch it with my sons. I've introduced it to everybody in the family.
I named my dog Humphrey.
You know, that's a
Bogart.
hard answer because there's a lot of movies that I just would say, oh, that's my favorite now. But I think historically, I'd say that's one I come back to.
You know, there's also a
Window.
movie. There's also a movie about the War in the Stars. So you know you can do some research. That's some good stuff right there. All right, paper Bible or digital Bible?
Digital.
Paper.
Whichever one's closest to me.
Okay.
Yes.
Favorite book favorite book of the Bible right now?
Romans.
You know, it always seems to be what I'm in the moment. You know, I would say
Right.
overall Gospel of John, but right now I'm in Numbers, and boy, all the complaining and the problems that Moses dealt with, I feel like, boy, I can identify with some of that. So Numbers today, but overall John.
Okay.
I
like
just
John.
wrote a Bible study on Nahum, so that's probably my favorite right now.
Okay. Good deal. Good deal. Favorite character in the Bible?
Well, I can tell you the one I probably relate the most to would be Jacob, which is, you know, you can read into that what you want. So
I decided not to go there. There's a lot of things that go to my mind. But we're trying to strive for unity, so we'll leave that right there. Okay, Jacob. Okay. Well, he was transformed into Israel.
yes,
So it depends on to what extent you're talking. So
he stumbled towards glory a lot though, and I feel like that's what I kind of do. So
yeah. Well, that's for finishing strong. We may not be child prodigies, but you know, Jacob became Israel. That's my hope. You know, Megan.
I think I most identify with Benaniah because I wrestle lions and pits on snowy days with my bare hands all the time.
Okay.
That's a joke. That's dumb. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I think probably I really like Peter because he just seems a lot like me, kind of speaking before he thinks a lot.
Okay. Perfect for a podcast.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Okay. Okay. Kevin.
Yeah, I was going to say Peter as well. Megan and I were kind of tracking on the same line here. I just, you know, I see in him both weakness and strength, both, you know, being broken and then the Spirit filling him and using him in ways I'm sure that he never thought would happen after he denies the Lord. So I'll throw Peter out today. Again, that could change tomorrow.
Sure.
But
Same.
yeah.
It would be interesting to go back to our younger self and find out who our heroes or characters we admire. They probably were like heroes, like, yeah, Paul. And then as we get older, Peter.
Yeah, I've always had an affinity for Daniel too. Just a lot of respect for him
Yeah.
and what he went through and his faithfulness.
Okay. So besides Ben Brewster's book, what would you recommend everyone reads in the next 12 months? Other than the Bible, of course.
There is a book.
Tove.
Sorry, go, John.
Wow.
Yes, A Church Called Tove by Scott McKnight. It's a great book.
Yeah. No, yeah, it is. It is. That's he's quite an author right there. What about yourself, Megan?
Rosaria Butterfield wrote a book called The Gospel Comes with a House Key. And it's all about like hospitality. And now that we're coming out of COVID, and I think America kind of struggles with hospitality anyway, I feel like that is the book we all need to read.
Wow, that sounds very intriguing.
And she was like a dean of an English department at Syracuse. So it's like really well done.
Okay. You got to top that, Kevin. Or pass if you can't top that.
Yeah, hard to top that. Hard to top those two. I've got the Church of Tove on my list here to read soon. I've been talking to John about that. He's brought it up to me a couple of times. You know, again, there's so many that I could. Just had a conversation with a young man, and I think one of the needs as we talk about unity is how we read the Bible, that our people approach it well. So I just referred to him a new edition of How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth by Fee and Stewart. Yeah. And I'd encourage people to become better readers of the Bible, and that's a good book to teach us how to develop a good hermeneutic. So there's one. Wouldn't say that's the only one, but I'll throw it out there because I was just talking about it with somebody.
No, that's awesome.
Referring it.
No, very good book. Very good book. Another one I think is Misreading Scripture Through Western Eyes. Mm-hmm. It's also a very good one because we have learned to read the Bible in the Church of Christ or the Restoration Movement, in a sense, I would say. But I think we can fall into misreading it through the wrong eyes, which also prevents us from being as unified as we could. So that's my little commentary. Oceans or mountains?
Mountains.
Whichever one is available.
Near the gas station. Okay.
Yeah, I live in San Diego, so I'll have to say ocean, but the mountains are close. We got both in our county, and I love them both, but love the beach.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Favorite place to live? We'll start with you, Kevin.
Where I am, San Diego. I've lived elsewhere, but I came back.
We're going to skip Megan because she's going to say anywhere. Okay, John, what do you say?
I love the Raleigh-Durham area, and we're going to move back there someday. So when I retire.
Okay. Megan, your thoughts?
I love Manhattan. I lived there for a summer, and I thought it was great. So I don't know what it's like right now because I hear it's not as wonderful, but I liked it when I was there.
Awesome. Awesome. Favorite place you want to visit, Megan?
Italy, Rome.
My sister got married there. Yeah, that sounds like a very, very nice place. I don't think I'm going to have pizza when I go there. I'm going to have to do something different. That seems too cliche. Favorite place you want to visit, John?
Israel.
Okay. Got that Common Ground Unity Israel tour coming up. You heard it here first, guys. Common Ground Unity tour. Start saving your shekels. There you go. Kevin?
I would say, so we're talking about places we haven't been. I'd like to go to Australia. My wife was born there and grew up there in her early years. So I'd love to take her there and us visit Australia.
A lot of prisoners out there. Got to be careful.
Absolutely. They need the gospel out there.
That's a historic joke. Some get it.
I know. It was a penal colony, right?
Yeah. Team Apple or Team Android?
Android.
Apple
as far as phone.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last one I added in, morning routine or whatever, if it's night routine, what would you say is your daily routine, I guess, on the spiritual front, reading, whatever?
I start out, first thing, get up, I get my coffee. And remember, unity starts with a cup of coffee. Folks, right?
That is right.
I get my coffee and I do my morning reading in the Word and spend some time in prayer. And if I don't start my day that way, or when I don't, my day doesn't go as well. Because I think spending time with God forms us. It shapes us in ways that when we deprive ourselves of that, we don't thrive spiritually. So for me, that works best. Not saying that's for everybody, but that works best for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ditto for me. I get up early in the morning. I love the house is quiet and nobody's up, and I take the dog out, I get my cup of coffee, and then I just sit down and have some quiet time with God. It's a good time.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Megan?
So I work an hour away from where I live. So I get my coffee and then I listen to the Dwell app on my way to work.
Oh, okay.
And then at night in the evenings, and I recommend this. This isn't me trying to be like hoity-toity. I genuinely recommend this. I have Dr. Jim Girdwood tutors me twice a week on Greek. And we've been doing that for 3 years. And learning Greek with him has helped my spiritual life and my spiritual formation. And it has helped me grow significantly in the past 3 years, just learning the original language. And of course, he's a professor, so he adds little things into it. And then I do my evenings, I do my Bible studies in the evening. But I'm telling you, if you get an opportunity, you can YouTube Greek lessons. You can, Mounds has actual classes that you can take. I highly recommend it because it has completely changed my life as far as being a Christian.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I appreciate just this time. We like to try to end Image Bearers with some lightness, and sometimes we do talk about heavy topics. I think this was an encouraging topic nonetheless, obviously talking about unity. And I appreciate, just the start, John. I think there probably have been a lot of conversations that people have had that never resulted in something like Common Grounds Unity. And so I appreciate your humility, your being led by God's Spirit to always defer, and just your spiritual, outlook. But I definitely want to say I appreciate, what you started. I know I do joke, but I think Kevin may have to jump, depending, I think, time-wise. But I wanted Tina and Ben to maybe just share a few words about what they appreciate about Common Grounds Unity, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap it up.
Well, I'll go. I really do appreciate the sentiment that Kevin shared in the beginning of how is the world going to be drawn to a group of people who can't even get along with each other. Where's the attraction to the good news of the gospel with that? And so I also appreciate the fact that you guys understand this is slow work. And I think in the US in particular, we want everything to happen quickly, and it's just not realistic. And then we feel disappointed. And so I really appreciate the slow and steady emphasis on relationships, because that is where things will grow from. So I'm really glad to be even on the periphery part of this. And so thanks for the work that you guys do, and Megan and Kevin for the energy that you bring to the podcast. It really is great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I echo what Tina said. I love, the first time John contacted me, I had no idea who John Teal was, but here he is taking the initiative, and I see a lot of that happening through Common Grounds Unity. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing, because, back to what you said, Kevin, I don't think Jesus prayed an impossible prayer. And he made it very clear that this was the key to the world believing. And so what y'all do, particularly John, Megan, and Kevin, I know you're donating your time, and I appreciate it. You're doing a lot of good, and I look forward to the future.
Thank you.
Well, amen. I appreciate just everything that was shared. I think just as an action item for those of us that are watching, let's get involved in Common Grounds Unity. If you're not already involved, I know the group is almost 2,000 members. Let's take it over the top and get those 2,000 members. I think with that, let's really go after being unified. I think Kevin said it perfectly. We can address a lot of things on a global level. We can send out Facebook rants and all these kinds of things, but it more comes down to those who we have proximity with as far as our geography. So get to know people around you. You don't necessarily have to join Common Grounds Unity. They don't have some special coffee. You can just, get a cup at Starbucks and start meeting someone down the street. But let's definitely go after, building unity and really being the family that God has called us to. As I close out with John 17, Jesus did not pray an impossible prayer that we be unified. That's the example we can provide to the world. So with that, John, did you want to say one last word before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for this, and thank you for watching. And if you want to learn more, you can go to www.commongroundsunity.org. We try to do it self-serve, so there's all kinds of information on there. There's essays, and you can listen to the podcast on the website, but you can also get the podcast on your favorite podcast app, and you can sign up for the Facebook on the About page. You can click on there. The Facebook group is a great place just to, as Tina said, it's a great place to just kind of listen and watch, and it's a great community. You can also sign up for the emails and receive the articles that go out every week. So we would love for you to join, and we appreciate you all.
All right. Thanks again, everyone, for your time.
Great to be with you.